If you're anything like me, you've laid awake at night dreaming.
Oh, but we need to do X because, here's a whole shareholders thing, right? We need to be ready at this point. We need to release our games at this point, even if they're not ready, right? Like they just need to be ready because that's what shareholders expect and so on. And it changes, and there's producers everywhere suddenly, right? And it changes from here's a small group where everybody is just amazingly talented and they're trying to really create magic, right? To, there's other reasons of making games other than, we want to just make the next huge thing, right? That could be so awesome, right? Like it very much changes from passion to, basically just being a business, right? And I mean, we're all running businesses, right? But I think once it gets down to, we need to maximize profits, and like every single decision has to go through people who, like the sales team and so on, right? It's just it ruins the thing, right? Like you couldn't write a great song if it's literally that section in the song is kind of like that needs to sound more like Justin Bieber, right? Like that, it needs to be fully in the control of the creatives, right? And then obviously you need to align with folks to make sure that the game properly gets marketed and so on. I think that's what we're seeing, and I mean it's not really a secret, right? I'm not trying to shit on AAA and all of this stuff, but we have seen AAA faltering in a way bigger way than we ever have before. Simply because the kind of like games that are getting produced like that, it's similar to Hollywood, right? Where in the 90s, even early 2000s still and so on, there were still movies getting made that really had heart still, right? And I recently heard Matt Damon and Ben Affleck and so on talk about this, right? Once it became everything became risk averse, it starts to create these kind of like slop products, right? Where it's just, this doesn't come from passion anymore and out of human ingenuity and so on. This is just something that we're trying to sell, and that doesn't connect with the humanity anymore, right?
Well, that's my perception. I think we're in a time when being purposefully on the edge, whether it's on the political edge, on the cultural edge, making a game that looks like it was an oil painting. Your game looks that way, by the way. Making a game that is edgy or like crossing a line, I think is the way forward for the industry, because AI in particular and Ben Affleck talked about this. It is like the distillation of all genres or all pieces of artwork, and it distills down into this boring average. Right?
It is literally designed to create generic stuff.
That's right. So my thinking I've thought a lot about our podcast we had together, man, and you've inspired me a ton. You mentioned in the previous podcast, and I didn't fully understand it when you mentioned it, but I've been thinking about it a lot. You mentioned that you want to take a genre and push it forward, right? Mm-hmm. Take it and expand it. And I didn't fully understand the implications of that until I read your tweet. You tweeted about, you said that oftentimes, basically the idea of your post was oftentimes your playtesters will tell you, hey, don't do this and don't do that and don't add this mechanic and don't add crafting and all this stuff because it doesn't fit. Well, maybe it doesn't fit the genre, right? Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes developers will be safe, and I'll do this as well. You'll listen to your feedback, you'll listen to your playtesters because you're supposed to, right? Well, that's what people say. I've even said that. Listen to your playtesters. The problem with that is you're just reskinning a game. You're reskinning Diablo. And so tell me about that tweet and tell me about your thought process and I guess the courage involved in expanding it.
Yes, and it is courage, right? Because you're literally risking your livelihood. You're risking everything at that point, right? Because you're making a game that you don't have any clue if anybody would want to play it, right? But you're making it because your heart tells you, I would want to play this. I think there are probably lots of players like me out there. So what I was basically trying to say is, I think every now and then you have to be okay with change, right? And I gave the example of if Miyamoto would have been stubborn and would have just stuck with, like, he was on a huge high in the early 90s, right? Just making Super Mario Bros. 3, Super Mario World, right? Then even Yoshi's Island, like he even improved stuff on top of that, right? Like he could have kept making 2D platformers for an eternity and he would have had a, you know, really steady business there and so on, right? And that probably could have worked, right? But it wouldn't have pushed the industry forward. And we went through probably a good 3 decades now where it was your responsibility as a developer to not just be okay with the status quo, right? Because it was generally accepted that if you just stick with the status quo, other people will come in and eat our lunch, right? And so Miyamoto, for example, in the early 90s, right? It must have taken a huge amount of guts to say, look, here's all this stuff that we know how to do, right? Like we know how to do 2D side scrollers. We have probably amazing tools that allow us to crank them out super fast, right? And every single time we make them, we sell 4, 5, 6 million copies. But then they went and saw, well, the whole 3D thing is approaching, right? And we really should throw basically all of that in the trash and we should make Mario 64 because that is where everything is heading. And we don't want to get stuck. And I can't fathom how much courage it must have taken for Nintendo to just say, yeah, that crazy Miyamoto guy just banked the entire company on his decisions, right? Like, because if Mario 64 would have been a failure, I'm pretty sure Nintendo wouldn't be around today. Yeah. Because no way, right? Like, they completely changed the industry with that game. And again, like, we are old farts now, right? Like, I don't know how you are old are, Thomas, right? But I'm 42 now. Yeah, so you're...
I'm getting there.
Yeah, you're getting there. But I'm 42 now. I lived through all that stuff, right? So it must have taken a tremendous amount of courage to basically throw all of that in the trash, right? And just say, well, we'll make a 3D platformer. And by the way, nobody knew what a 3D platformer was, right? Because it didn't exist. Like, and they just had the courage to say, but I trust that we are good designers, right? And the sales team trusted the designers to think that, oh, they will probably come up with something great because they've done really great things before, right? Yeah. And what I have seen in generally in the last 10 years or so, right, probably even 15 years or so, is that got thrown into the trash, right? Because we saw things like, hey, like Call of Duty, for example, who would go and really change the Call of Duty formula at this point? Nobody, right? Because it's revenue that always comes in every year, right? And you can't really change it, risk it, do anything with it, right? You can maybe change the bells and whistles, like add some bells and whistles on top, right? Or modify things here and there. But every now and then, I think we need bigger changes, right? And when it comes to ARPGs, well, one of the main reasons, or the main reason why No Rest for the Wicked exists and why we've worked on it, is because I got really frustrated by why has this genre moved into that direction and why has it become so stale? When I played Diablo 2 in the early 2000s, I was like, Jesus Christ, look at this game, right? Imagine what we'd be playing 10 years from now, right? If they already have all of this, it should be so simple to just add cooler things on top, change the genre a little bit, improve the combat system and so on, right? And then Diablo 3 came out and was basically, hey, we made Diablo 2 but on steroids. We didn't change the combat system, we just upped everything to 11, right? We didn't look at recent trends, we didn't look at what we could do with 3D and so on. It's basically Diablo 2, but everything is faster. And then funnily enough, that kind of like became the norm for ARPGs, right? Like if you talk to people today and you ask them what is an ARPG, they will tell you, it's basically a click spam game, right? Like it's one of those button mashy, like a Diablo 3 or Diablo 4 or Path of Exile 1 and 2, right? And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, right? Like these games are fun. And similar to 2D platformers, right? These games are fun. They will always be fun. There should always be developers that make that stuff, right? But I think at Moon, I think we always kind of like had we started with Ori, where the whole idea was, well, we don't know why nobody's making Metroidvanias anymore, right? Yeah. And then the idea was, well, let's look at Super Metroid, let's look at Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and where can we improve? And my decision was, I think these games are some of my favorite games ever made, but they're not great platformers. So maybe we can improve the platforming component, right? That's literally how it started. Like why don't these games control as well as a Mario game does? And we kind of like slipped into this whole thing of like, with every game that we touch now, we try to advance the genre, right? And it's probably really stupid. Like from a business decision, it's unbelievably stupid, right?
Yeah.
Because I remember being in the calls with Microsoft back then, with Ori and the Will of the Wisps as well. We decided, let's rip up this whole thing, right? Like we could have easily made like an expansion pack kind of thing, where it's just, here's Ori 2. And it's kind of like what Ori 1 was, but just with more levels and this and that. And it would have totally worked. But I wanted to really push that forward. I wanted to completely change the combat system, to completely like try to really look at everything, to do to Blind Forest what Super Mario Bros. 3 was to Super Mario Bros. 1, right? That was the idea with Will of the Wisp. Let's really push the genre forward, and let's really kind of like elevate everything that we had. And I remember, for example, the first calls that I had with Microsoft regarding Blind Forest, like when I first pitched a storyboard, I was working with Johannes Fiegelhuber. He was an amazing artist from Austria. I wrote the story and we did the first storyboards, right? And I showed it to Microsoft and they went on me, right? They were like incensed about, why in the world would you want to do storytelling in a 2D platformer? It's never been done before. It's so stupid. Not even Miyamoto does it. Look at what they're doing with Mario, right? The story never matters, blah, 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 right? And I made the argument that, guys, trust us, right? Like, we'll try it. Maybe you will warm up to it, right? Give us a chance. And over time, at some point, they were probably so annoyed that they just went, let's let that idiot do whatever he wants, right? Because who cares? Like, it's not gonna break the game, right? Like, worst case, people skip through the cutscenes, right? And the funny thing that happened was that Blind Forest came out, and that story stuff became the huge marketing beat for Ori and the Blind Forest, right? Because you literally had people playing the game for 10 minutes and starting to cry because they were already invested into the characters and so on, right? And then the thing was, the funny thing was, then we did Ori and the Will of the Wisps, right? And I remember being in the room with Mark Coates, our producer back then, and he was the one who ultimately convinced me that we should do Ori and the Will of the Wisps, because I already wanted to push ahead and do No Rest for the Wicked at that point. But he was really kind of like the guy who convinced me by appealing to me being a perfectionist, right? He literally said in the thing, it was like, Thomas, you could literally take Blind Forest and just perfect it and make your Super Mario Bros. 3. Why would you not want to do that, right? And I was like, he's right, you know? Like, of course he is.
Yeah.
So we decided to do that. And then the immediate thing from Microsoft was, hey, you guys need more story, right? Because story was amazing in Blind Forest, right? And we're like, that's such a different tone from when we pitched the first story was to you, right? Where it was all, no, let's be risk averse. Let's not do story because it hasn't been done before in 2D platformers, and it isn't important in 2D platformers. But we made it important, right? Yeah. And then even from the people who were so critical about it, right? It was like, yeah, okay, do more of that because it actually worked.
Man, so this attitude of wanting to just make games you want to play has it's put you in an interesting position with No Rest for the Wicked, because from the outside looking in, this has been a wild journey of making this game, right?
Tell me about it.
Can you tell me? Well, I'll give a little anecdote here, because I reached out to you like 3 months ago, and I just said, I was just basically complaining about funding because, I had budget cuts for my game. And I was expecting you to say, yeah, it's hard, you can do it. Here's some advice. But you basically said, I don't even know if you remember this, but you basically said, bro, this is the way it is. You know, like you said something about your studio had funding cuts or had some issues with funding, and you were just like, basically just like toughen up. And I'm curious, is that attitude new for you? This sort of thick-skinned attitude, or is this something you've learned through No Rest for the Wicked? Or does that question make sense?
I think it's I trust myself as an artist to be able to figure it out. I trust myself and our team enough, right, that we're smart enough dudes to figure it out. John Lennon had this quote, right, where he said, I'm an artist, you give me a tuba and they'll get you something out of it, right?
Yeah.
I see it that way. Like, for example, with Blind Forest, we were totally ready for Microsoft to basically come in and tell us, guys, these cutscenes, cut them, right? And we already had prepared for doing the Mario Galaxy thing, right? Where, there's still story, but it's told through little storybook panels, right? And you would literally just see a page and a little painting and story, and Ori went on to do this and that, right? And we even had that fully prepared, but luckily enough that didn't happen. But I mean, you just gotta fish where the fish are biting, right? And every now and then, this will happen to you. This happens everywhere, right? It doesn't matter how successful a developer you are. A lot of times it's even me doing that to people, right? Like where I tell people, guys, cool ideas, but we can't make it work, right? We don't have the resources to do this. I ask you to do the best thing you can do within the resources, within the budget limits that you have, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times what I have found is that those limitations oftentimes are actually a good thing. I'll give you an example. At Blizzard, what I heard, because I wasn't there during the Warcraft 3 days and so on, right? But what I heard is that Warcraft 3, all the cinematics and so on, were a miracle that they came together, right? Like one of the first things that I did when I joined Blizzard, because I was such a huge fan of Warcraft 3 and the way they told the story and so on, was to open up these cinematic models and to look at them and see, well, how did they make this stuff, right? And they were god awful. Like these models were just, you couldn't do so many things. You couldn't deform them properly and so on, right? Because they would break all the time, like the rigs and so on. You have to imagine that was the early 2000s, right? There was none of the tools that we have today existed. So it was all garbage, right? So they did things like when Arthas kills his father, right? If you have all the tools available to you, you would just show that, right? Like you would just put the camera on Arthas and show his father and really cool, see the stabby move. But because that breaks, right? Like you can't actually do the full body animation and all of that stuff. They did this really clever thing where when he walks up to his father to kill him, they pan the camera over to the wall where the shadow is, the silhouette is of Arthas actually stabbing his father, right? And it hides all the garbage from the rig and the prop animation and all of that stuff. Yeah. But it's epic, right? Like it's just, you see him actually killing his father, but you don't actually see it, right? You see it in the shadow, right? And it's a brilliant move. It literally probably costs 100 times less than what it would have cost to actually fix that shot and fix it in post and all of that stuff, right? Yeah. And a lot of times it works out like that, right? So you kind of have to trust yourself that, guys, even if you don't have the budget to do X or Y, right? Do the best thing within the budget that you have, and you might just hit gold there.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think about AAA, because it's like, you wonder if it's just there's just too many resources in these studios, you know? The budgets are way too big. And it's funny because I hit some kind of stride this year, because I've been kind of basically making games solo for the last year. And I've just realized I can make games so fast. Like the tools available to me.
Yeah, I saw your videos, by the way. Like it's crazy.
Oh, have you seen them? Thanks, man.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like really quick. I'll do it in 3 hours. I appreciate that. I'll do it in 3 hours. And I mean, it looks like an indie game, but it's like the resources available to us as game developers these days is bananas. And then I think about AAA and I'm like, I don't even know if they know that indies and indie studios is so hard to define, because you're independent, but your game is going to be $60, right? So it's kind of a AAA game, but I just those labels
we're
are
independent in the same way that Larian is independent, right? Where it's just, yes, we are an indie studio technically, but we're not three guys in a bedroom anymore.
So I see AAA like moving at a pace of this, and then I see indies or like just small studios that nobody knows about moving at a pace like this.
Yeah.
And because they're scrappy, you know, it reminds me. I watched the Revolutionary War document, the American Revolution documentary from Ken Burns. It's amazing. It's an incredible new documentary. It took him like 10 years to make. What's really fascinating about the American Revolution is how scrappy the colonies were, the American colonies were. And they weren't scrappy in the sense that they did it themselves. They were scrappy in the sense that they could manipulate France to help them. Like they had all these weird, like back alley negotiations and ways to win the war. Like losing the war wasn't an option, so they just did everything they could, and it created this almost poetry and this mythos about the founders that would not have been there had it been some generic, hey, just funnel in money and win the war. And so it makes me think about your studio. It makes me think about independent studios where this strange, bizarre, like scrappy way of making games creates these really interesting projects. And then you look at AAA, it almost looks like an AI prompt. You know, it's just so flat. Everything feels flat, and I can't even put a finger on it. Why it looks flat? Why it looks a certain way? But you know,
it's because of that. It's because these decisions. I think it's because of that. It's because these decisions, like that, should be made in a creative, scrappy way, right? Where the magic of creation should come through, are being influenced and colored by outside factors, right? By like, oh, that thing that you did looks really cool, but we can't actually put that as loot in the game because that needs to be MTX, right? Because all of that garbage, right? Yeah. And every year, by the way, I send out a message, a summary basically of the year, right? And I sent that to our Moon Studios team, and usually I ended up with something like, never doubt the small group of people can change the world, because it's the only thing that ever has, right? That's this old saying.
It's the
right?
only thing that ever has. Yeah.
Yeah. It's this old saying. And there is something very true about this, right? It's never been a huge group, a mass of people that has really influenced change, right? It has always been a small group of passionate people that wanted to move something forward, right? Yeah. Because there is something that happens. There's also this rule of 150 or something, right? That when a company gets to 150 plus people, that's where things start to fall apart. That's where the management overhead becomes so great that you're actually hurting all the people that are geniuses in your team, right? Because now they're not doing the thing anymore that they're good at, but they're managing. Yeah. I think that's very, very true. It's just money being spent in really silly ways, right? And I'm still kind of scrappy. I want Moon Studios to still always keep that kind of like startup culture, right? Of like, we're just a bunch of crazy dudes, right? That just make games, and let's not be stupid with the way we spend money. Even if our games become successful and so on, right? I'm sure we'll need that war chest at some point. Let's not go. Let's stay with our feet on the ground, right? Because who knows what will happen in the future.
Well, speaking of money, let's elephant in the room is that you sold 50,000 copies in a day for No Rest for the Wicked. 74,000 copies. That was last week, right?
That was like, and it kept going like that. By the way, like we were, yeah, it's crazy. Like so. No Rest for the Wicked is a really, like, I think this will probably be studied, right? Because it's such a fun example of how developers can screw up and then actually correct the ship and so on, like write the ship and so on. So here's what happened to us, right? We released No Rest for the Wicked in early access. Our publisher was Private Division. So Private Division was basically this label from Take-Two, right? Take-Two basically saw, hey, it's not smart to put all eggs in one basket, right? Then folks like Michael Borish came along and kind of like pitched to them, hey, we should really have a label that focuses on smaller games, right? Which I thought, perfect. That's exactly what you should do. You shouldn't just make $200, $300, $400, $500 million games, right? You should also like invest money into genius creators, because who knows who makes the next Minecraft, right?
Yep.
And so they did that, and that's what they basically pitched to me, and I was like, yeah, I want to sign up with that label because that sounds great, right? Like that really is something that I can gel with. So we went through Ori and the Will of the Wisps. We shipped that, right? Then we fully focused on the Rest for the Wicked, and we delayed the release internally a few times, right? Because we weren't quite ready. And then at some point, Private Division was like, guys, you gotta ship, right? Like, we gotta get it out there. And we were like, let's get it out there in early access, because this game is so complex. There's no way this is like the final version, right? Like, we'll need to ship it into early access, same as what, like, we had this whole argument with them, right? Like, Blizzard does it all the time with like public, like private public releases, right? And they use that feedback to improve the game and so on. And we were able to convince them that early access is a good thing and we should do that. So we released it. Game was really successful at the start, right? Made a ton of money and so on. But a lot of that obviously went into the publisher's pockets, right? Like, as you probably are well aware, right? Like, the deals that you sign are very much in favor of the publishers. So at some point we got the call from Private Division that, from Take-Two rather, that, well, they're shutting down Private Division, right? Because the money doesn't make any sense anymore. We'll make billions of dollars with GTA 6 anyway, right? Who cares, right? And so we were like, oh, what does that mean? Like, and like, so we just like basically scrambled, right? And like looked at, oh, how much money do we have in the bank? And by the way, war chest, right? Like, this is where this came in really importantly, right? Like, this is where they suddenly paid dues. And we were just telling them, guys, okay, so if that happens, right, we obviously don't want to see our game getting canceled or getting shoveled off to some other entity that we don't know, right? So how about we actually discuss buying the rights back, the publishing rights back completely, right? And we had to pay a tremendous amount of money. Like, just, you can imagine, right? Like, just, we had to pay a tremendous amount of money to pay the publishing rights back, right? And it was really scary because No Rest for the Wicked was out there, and obviously, like, our burn rate is quite high at this point, right? And we just had to shoulder it all ourselves now.
Well, also, were the reviews good for
the
early?
Reviews at the start were good, and then we did the Crucible update, and the reviews were still good, right? Yeah. And then we had all been working on the Breach, which basically doubled the content and all of that, right? Yeah. And I got so focused on just putting more and more content in, because that was the one thing that people constantly complained about, that it's very good, but there's just not enough content, right? So I went heads down, content, right? And then Breach came out, and because I was so focused on content, right, there was no way for me to pull back and just properly playtest the game. Yeah. In the late stages, I played, you know, like until like 3-4 months before release, right? But in the last 3 months, we made some really critical changes still, right? Yeah. And I had to finish that content, otherwise we wouldn't have been able to ship, right? But there were some changes made that really didn't gel well with us, right? And we got ass whipped, right, when we released. We had to release, and we got our ass handed to us, right? Because it was just really difficult, right? And the level up curve was not properly balanced and so on, right? So I went into kind of like crazy mode, right?
Whoa.
And
can I ask you really quick?
The designers. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I just want to clarify. Was this before or after you spent a ton of money buying it back?
That was after.
Oh, man.
It's super scary, yeah. That was after.
Okay,
so,
jeez.
So Breach came out, right, and we got just bombed by negative reviews, right? And like people were like, oh, this is so unbalanced and super difficult and da-da-da-da-da, right? So, but within a couple of days, we had the situation fixed, right? And then players got happy and so on. But the problem is, once you fall into negative reviews, right? Once you fall into a negative, it's unbelievably hard to get the response on Steam and so on, right? To get to positive again and then to very positive, right? So I announced on Steam back then, like, and made a funny face, right? It was like, look, we are mostly negative right now or something, right? Like,
oh gosh,
I'm gonna prove you all wrong, right? And we're gonna turn the ship around. And so we did, right? And it was just the same thing again. Like, a lot of times as a developer, you get beaten down, even by your own player base, right? And they were right? Like, that's the thing. They were absolutely right with their criticism and so on, right? and we made those changes. Then they were happy again, but it took some time, right? Then we did Breach Refined. We basically did this other update patch, right, that fixed everything, where we felt like this is in a pretty good spot now, right? And very slowly the reception turned around, right? And then right after Breach Refined, we started working on No Rest for the Wicked together, right? Which had the last batch of changes. Like we looked at more and more of the community feedback and so on. And we did all of that. And we did a whole bunch of other things, right? We just tuned and polished and everything, right? And we released No Rest for the Wicked together, and things went ape, right? Like it went crazy.
This was last week, right?
This was last week. So there was like our marketing lady, Apurva, basically came up with this whole thing of like, guys, I think we have a perception, an attention issue, not a quality issue, because the game is actually really good. And when people play it, they love it. But just not enough people know about it, right? So she came up with this whole plan of like, it hurts, but we're gonna do a minus 40% sale, right? Yeah, so it's heavy, and we're gonna do a free weekend, right? So that everybody gets to play it. By the way, I love the free weekend. Like that really like did its thing. Like that, like is now something where I would really say, oh my God, lots more developers should look at this, because it was basically a demo, right? Because the game, like No Rest for the Wicked, is a game that you couldn't possibly finish on a weekend. It allowed people to just dive in at a really like no cost of entry to just dive in, and we got like an insane conversion rate, right? Like compared to what you see in the industry, it was like 3-4 times higher, right? Where it's like so many people who just got to play the free weekend immediately went and buy it, right? So all of that kind of like resulted in, oh my God, we were #1 game on Steam for a good time there, and just the game sold, you know, like at first 30,000 copies a day, then 40, then 50, then 74,000 copies a day. Then, you know, it went to 60,000 copies a day, 50,000 copies a day, etc. It just went absolutely bonkers, right? So
was the multiplayer, is multiplayer that steroids that your game needed? Is that what it was, or was it the discount?
Or maybe it's both. I think it's there's this cool Malcolm Gladwell book called The Tipping Point, right? And I think that's just what we reached, right? Like we had been working on the game for such a long time that all the polish came in and the multiplayer came in, so it became really enticing and a really good product, right? And I think the free weekend was the thing that pushed it over the edge, right? Where there was no big fee anymore to spend, right? You could just try it, right? And once you try it, you love it, right? So I think that's what it is. I think we hit that tipping point in terms of like the quality of the game, and we made it easy for people to play it, and that I think was the rocket fuel.
I'm studying the art style of No Rest for the Wicked right now, and please, I want to break down what the brand identity is, and why it is so cohesive. You use a lot of saturated colors. That's the first thing. It's very saturated. I'm looking at some screenshots here, but there's also some very low saturated parts of the shot. So like I'm looking at, let me share my screen really quick, because I want to try and figure it out, because I'm fascinated by the art style. I've never really seen a game with this art style before. So like super vibrant greens, right? Just insane levels.
Yeah, you know who we are ripping off with that?
Who?
Caravaggio. It's the bright dark that he coined.
Can I Google that? How do I spell that?
Yeah. Caravaggio, C-A-R-A-V. You will get it anyway. C-A-R.
There he is, Caravaggio.
Caravaggio.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's take a look here.
And now open up, for example, The Taking of Christ by Caravaggio, right? Let's take a look at that.
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously I did go to art school, right? Because I had to study this for years. So let's take a look at this real quick. Or like, just like, I mean, this is brilliant, right?
Yeah. There's certain colors that are hyper saturated.
Yes. So obviously, like, it's very saturated, right? But what he always did was also he played with the colors in a way where the light and dark kind of like explains his message, right? So, for example, Christ here is depicted in, and by the way, I'm not religious at all, right? But I find it fascinating what the old masters did. Christ here is depicted in like full light, right? And so on. And then it's not a mistake that the people who take him have like black armor, right? With like really strong contrasts and so on, right? Because he basically wants to say like these guys were right? And so on. And you see this all the time in his paintings. Let me just find some. Can you open up, or can you find the incredulity of St. Thomas?
Yeah.
Like this is such a great thing, right? Where it's like, hey, you have all the like basically this is one where it's they basically try to depict the story of like, you know, Christ is coming back and so on, right? And then you had all the apostles kind of look at it, right? And he did this really nice thing where it's almost grotesque, right? That they're not believing him, right? And you even have like Thomas sticking his finger in there, right? Because he doesn't believe that, you know, he wants to know for sure, right? And so on. But the way he always played with colors and so on, right? Is very, very interesting, right? Like, and the way he played with darkness, like most of his paintings, like 70% of most of his paintings are just black, right? Just straight up black. And now you look at No Rest for the Wicked, right? And it's just all the stuff that isn't really all that important super right dark. Now, right? It's just dark, right? It's just black. We're using basically the same old principles that have been used before, right? And I mean, that's where I think this is really important, right? Like, if obviously it's easy these days to just open up Unreal Engine, slap a bunch of assets in there and like throw a light in there, right? And it'll look good. But then the question is, but that doesn't make you an artist, right? An artist's work is so much more, right? Like, you actually need to look at the composition, you need to understand what you want to say with things, right? You need to, you know, and all of that stuff has to influence it, right? Like, where do you actually put your lights? What are you actually giving focus, right? Because you also, lights work in a way where you direct the eyes with that, right? Like, if you look at, for example, this image here, right? Where's your eye directed to, right? It's towards the brightest spot. It's towards that oven, for example, right?
That's right.
And all the, like, your eye wouldn't immediately go to the table in the background or something, right? That kind of thing. So there's just a lot of these considerations that are taking place. And I think the reason why people are infatuated with the art style of No Rest for the Wicked is because of that. Because you look at, like, every now and then you get these vistas that are like, oh my God, look at this, right? And it's not just, yeah, technically it looks cool, right? Like, oh my God, it has global illumination or something, right? But just, oh my God, this looks like a painting, right? This looks like something an artist would do, because an artist did do it.
That's a great quote, by the way. It looks like art because an artist did it. I love that. Oh man, dude, this I don't know. Is there any game that looks like this?
Don't ask me, right? Like, that's for people to decide.
I've never seen it. There's something really oily about this. It feels like.
By the way, I mean, we're doing that everywhere, right? Like, all of our textures are hand painted, right? Yeah. Where you actually see the brush strokes still, right? And I want to see Michael's art in there, where you actually see how scrappy sometimes like textures are and so on, right?
Yeah. Like, you can absolutely right there. See awesome.
That. Yeah, it's almost like seeing the fingerprint, right, by somebody, right?
I freaking love that. Okay, let's take a look at the engine. Whoa, this isn't Unity?
This is Unity. Yeah, I mean, this is not really Unity. Like, our whole renderer and everything is our own thing, right? So.
Wait, so hold on. It's Unity, but you've basically changed it so much with editor tools and inspectors that it looks completely different.
Yeah, so we've kept the UI, but everything else basically, and how it all works, right, is basically proprietary.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah, so we can take a look at this. So, for example, I have these two scenes open right now, right? This is literally where you start, right? And there's, like, this is where you start the game. You wake up on in the shallows here, right? And then this is where you all explore, right? Right? And if you walk on this, like, if the designers.
Mike and or Lisa, please come downstairs. Mike and or Lisa, please come to the circulation desk. Good evening, everyone. The time now is 4:36 p.m. We are closing in 24 minutes. The time is 4:36. We're closing in 24 minutes. All computers are shutting down at 4:50. At this time, stay current and photocopy your documents. All meeting rooms and study rooms are officially closed. Second floor bathroom is closing at 4:45, while the first floor is closing at 4:55. If you have any electrical supplies to check out at this time, please make your way to our kiosk located on the second floor main stairwell and the first floor at the circulation desk. We will reopen tomorrow at 9 a.m. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your evening.